Jerry Seinfeld is in the news again. So I was scrolling Facebook and one of my friends had posted this. Jerry Seinfeld's past relationship with teenager resurfaces after he says he misses the dominant masculinity. But before I talk about that article, let's talk about him where he was talking about the dominant masculinity. Now, this is from People. Jerry Seinfeld says he misses hierarchy and dominant masculinity in society. I like a real man. So these men really miss the days when men simply having a peen meant that they were above women, is what it seems, or that the lighter the complexion, the higher up the hierarchy. That's what I'm taking simply by this title, but let's read the article. Jerry Seinfeld is sharing his thoughts on masculinity. All right, during his appearance on the Free Press, Honestly with Bari Weiss podcast, Seinfeld, who's 70, spoke to his interest in making a movie set in the nostalgia for his childhood in the 60s. There's another element that I think is the key element, and that is an agreed upon hierarchy, which I think is absolutely vaporized in today's moment, the comedian said. I think that is why people lean on the horn and drive the crazy way that they drive, because we have no sense of hierarchy. And as humans, we don't really feel comfortable like that. No, Jerry, you don't feel comfortable because the hierarchy tended to put men like you higher up than other people. If you want to talk about nostalgia, that is part of what makes that moment attractive looking back as a man. Yes, you can look back and like that nostalgia. He then expressed nostalgia for figures of that time period and described President JFK, boxer Muhammad Ali, actor Sean Connery, and sports broadcaster Howard Cosell as real men. You can go all the way down the line. That's a real man. I want to be like that someday. Well, no, I never really grew up, Seinfeld said. I mean, you don't want to as a comedian because it's a childish pursuit, but I miss a dominant masculinity. Yeah, I get the toxic masculinity, but still, I like a real man. And if he really likes a real man, he should be able to go after that real man. Seinfeld's movie Unfrosted, which marked the comedian's directorial debut, takes place in 1963. The movie centers around the fictional invention of the Pop Tart and takes inspiration from the Cold War and space era. It even features a loving homage to another piece of 60s media, Mad Men, with notable cameos from John Hamm and John Slattery as advertising executives. Seinfeld also spoke to his interest in reading bad reviews of his own work during his appearance on the podcast. There's nothing funnier to me than people complaining, I didn't laugh, because they want to laugh, he said. And I relate to it. I get it. I think it's funny that you hated it because you wanted to laugh and you didn't laugh. So maybe try to be more funny. But in order to be more funny, he would have to get out of his own brain and thinking he is the funniest person around and actually understand what is going on in the discourse. But his kind is too hard to get into it because he won't think about the discourse or other people or what humor is today. Is not punching down and it's not dominating. He continues with, it doesn't matter what you think of me. Why would I think I'm going to make something that everyone will like? What sense does that make? You got to be insane to think that. Then why are you complaining, Jerry Seinfeld? But because of that interview, this popped back up into the discourse. Jerry Seinfeld's past relationship with teenager resurfaces after he says he misses dominant masculinity. Due to the release of his poorly received Netflix movie Unfrosted earlier in May, comedian Jerry Seinfeld has been doing tons of press recently and has created quite a few headlines along the way. Most recently, Jerry Seinfeld made some comments about masculinity in society, and where he was talking about he misses real men. Like I said, he should go after real men if that's what he wants. And, him mentioning Muhammad Ali, didn't Muhammad Ali get with a teenager as well? I think maybe that is the reason why he pedestalizes someone like that. But we don't need to reread this comment. All right, so Seinfeld's comments about liking a real man perhaps haven't been received as he expected, as it's largely just caused people on social media to reminisce on that time in the early 90s when he was allegedly dating Shoshana Lonstein Groos, who he met when she was still in high school. The timeline of Seinfeld dating Bruce when she was a teenager has been fact checked by Snopes, citing a 1994 article in People magazine. Jerry Seinfeld was strolling through Central Park one day in May 1993 when he spotted a stranger he now calls the most wonderful girl in the world. Seinfeld, then 38, sallied over, made small talk, and went away with the telephone number of Shoshana Lonstein, then 17, and a senior at the private Nightingale Barnford School in Manhattan. Many who came across his comments about real men were quick to remind him that no matter what your definition of masculinity is, dating a teenager who is 21 years younger than you should certainly never be part of it. As Matt said, curious where grooming a 17-year-old girl as a 38-year-old man fits into his definition of dominant masculinity, right? Because these people are perfectly fine with grooming of sorts as long as it's a straight couple and they're dominating a girl. That's what it seems like. Timothy says, real men? You mean like dating a 17-year-old when you're 38? Sure, let's bring them back. Or not. Let's not bring this back. It seems like Jerry Seinfeld is getting a bit more than he expected, but times are changing and these older people are just not getting with it. But, it gives discourse to social media. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think about this dominant masculinity and real men. I don't know what to think about this article from Business Insider, but I feel like it is trying to give these men an excuse for why they are failing and flailing so hard, for why there are over 7 million men of working age that are not in the workforce and not looking for a job. This says America's most ridiculous hiring hurdle. Let's talk about it. America's young men aren't working. Well, a smaller share of them are working anyway. As of April, about 86% of prime age men, meaning those between 25 and 54, were employed, a significant drop from the 50s and 60s when that number was closer to 95%. And 52% of men 16 to 24 were working, compared with well above 60% decades ago. There are plenty of explanations or excuses for what might be going on. Perhaps it has to do with recessions or disabilities or wages not being high enough to draw them in. There is an equally robust number of proposed solutions to this conundrum: upskilling and reskilling, convincing men to go into fields historically viewed as being for women, getting employers to be more realistic about requiring college degrees. Let's toss another possible explanation into the mix: the unemployment insurance system. The way firings are handled might actually affect whether the guys get hired in the first place. Like I said, this just sounds like some BS. The fact that they even put in talking about the fields that were historically for women, those fields are typically underpaid. And these men are supposedly dropping out because they don't have social status. So they figure being unemployed was better. But y'all think that they're going to take these wages that women are expected to take? I doubt that. They would rather be completely poor and dependent on women. And then talking about get more realistic about requiring college degrees. Men were overwhelmingly college degree earners until women got the opportunity to go to school. Now they are dropping out as if schooling has changed completely, and it has not. School system has been the same. It's just that women aren't being oppressed. And so without that oppression, they cannot compete with the women. And so they are falling out of the workforce and the education. Out of college and all of that. First, some basics. When a worker is laid off or fired, they're generally eligible for unemployment insurance, a program designed to help people stay afloat financially while they look for their next gig. After applying and being approved, which can be a pain, unemployed workers collect a check each week. The checks don't replace all their wages. The amount is generally less than half of what they were making before. It's something to tide them over so they can pay their bills, keep food on the table, etc. And that's good for the economy because it's a drag on everything when people suddenly can't do those things. It's a straightforward enough idea, but the way we pay for UI is pretty wonky. Every business pays a tax into the pool of money that goes to paying unemployment insurance. The tax bill is footed by the employer, not the employee, unlike Social Security, which gets paid for by both. Employers pay a certain percentage to UI on every paycheck, and those with more employees wind up kicking in more. It's sort of like the employer's part of Social Security, but instead of it being a flat tax, the business kicks in X percentage each month. The rate can go up and down, a system called experience rating. The experience in question is how much the employer has laid off workers in the past. More layoffs mean a higher tax rate. The thinking is that the more workers the company has to let go, the more it pushed people to draw on the UI system. So therefore, it should pay more in its unemployment taxes. The idea behind this is understandable, though most countries don't do UI this way. If you want to discourage businesses from firing people willy-nilly, you penalize those that do. But in practice, it's had some unintended consequences. A new paper from Matt Darling, a senior employment policy analyst at the Niskanen Center, a center-right think tank, argues that the experience rating system has made some employers reluctant to hire workers they're worried won't work out, and that young men in particular are the ones being harmed. Now, let's just think about what they said. They're worried about the workers that won't work out. So they are already assuming that these workers are going to be sucky workers and either they're going to have to fire them or these people will quit. So it's not about the unemployment system, is that these men are not that great of workers. That is what I'm gathering. That's the reason why I said I figured that this was some BS. If you are going to get taxed for any employees that get laid off, you're going to be a lot more hesitant about hiring. It isn't the sole driver, but I think it's an important one. The experience rating system wasn't nationwide until the federal government in the mid 1980s mandated that states adopt the program. Darling looked at what happened when it was forced on the state of Washington, which held out on implementing the program until 1985. He compared it with Oregon, which had already had an experience rating in place. The state's unemployment rates for young entry level workers moved in sync before Washington's experience rating was in place. When it was implemented, workers in Washington started to see higher unemployment. Darling found that after the experience rating was introduced in Washington, the employment rate for workers 15 to 25, basically entry level workers, increased by 2.5 percentage points. The effect was driven almost entirely by young men. Unemployment went up by 2.7 percentage points for young men, but only by 1.1 percentage points for young women. It does sort of tie into a lot of things that people have been thinking about. Why is the male employment rate declining in general? The prospect of higher unemployment taxes can prompt employers to steer clear of people they perceive as riskier workers or opt to hire contractors. In more nefarious situations, they might try to discourage workers from applying for unemployment or make their employees so miserable that they quit and therefore aren't eligible for UI benefits. So, why would young men bear the brunt of this? So, here is a chart that speaks to the employment population ratio of men ages 25 to 54. And you see it has been declining since what is it? It looks like the 50s. And what was going on in the 60s and 70s and up to this point, women were less oppressed. They can call it what they want, but when women were oppressed and didn't have opportunities, that meant men could be in the workforce without even having to compete with women. Now that women are out here working, going to school, whatever, now it just seems like men are giving up. Men tend to outnumber women in economically vulnerable industries such as manufacturing and construction. In recession, those sectors are often hardest hit, meaning their jobs are among the first to go. The pandemic recession was the exception. Businesses in those sectors may also be extra sensitive to their experience ratings. They don't want to even add more to their taxes. Now, we all know that manufacturing and construction are vulnerable. And these men know this. So instead of going to school, they still just do what they want. We know where the climate of the economy is going, yet they are not adapting. They are not agile. That's one of the reasons why they are vulnerable. Employers might also see young men as riskier to bring on board. Fairly or unfairly, there's a stereotype that young men are more volatile, more immature, and less responsible than their female counterparts. Darling notes that men drop out of college at higher rates than women and argues that the same behavioral differences that drive that trend can also mean businesses see them as a higher layoff risk. There are some ideas about policy solution to fix experience rating and UI. Darling's preference is to axe the experience rating and just pick a simple tax rate. This just all sounds like a bunch of excuses. Implementing any of these solutions would be complicated as there's rarely much political will to act on unemployment insurance. People realize how screwed up the system is when times are bad, see the Great Recession, the pandemic, but once things get back to normal, everyone sort of forgets. Whatever appetite for action there might have been in Congress dies out. There's no real constituency of people who considers themselves the unemployed worker. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill and in state legislators do not love talking about taxes unless they are cutting them. As for why so many young men aren't working, it's a doozy. There's no quick fix for recessions or incarceration rates or pay or any of the many other factors driving the shift, but maybe a step in the right direction here is to at least talk about it. And hey, if you're a business owner, maybe take a risk on that young guy who walks through your door instead of worrying about what might cost you if you decide to fire them. Now, they talk about pay. Well, women are the ones that have had historically, lower rates of pay, but women still go to work. These people, and this is a woman that wrote this. This is just full of poop. This whole article is just full of poop. And I cannot believe she put these words on here. But even in the euphemistic terms that she is using, it's just saying that these people are more unreliable. If we hire them, we might have to fire them for the same reasons why they are not staying in college, because they don't have the will to stay in college. They are not as reliable as women. And so they are falling out of the workforce and dropping out of college. They need to stop trying to coddle these men and give them excuses for why they are not achieving in this patriarchal world that already edifies and pedestalizes men more than women. All right, I'm done with my little sermon. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment.